Alcor is pleased to welcome you all to today's webinar. Founded in 2008 and headquartered in California, Alcor Solutions is a global cloud advisory and implementation services company serving clients in multiple geographies, including North America, Europe, Japan, and India. Our consultants provide advice to leading businesses on cloud platforms, architecture, enterprise service management, and integrating IT service delivery. Our clients include Fortune 500, as well as leading organizations in multiple industry verticals. We partner with ServiceNow, Microsoft, Bomgar, Salesforce, FireEye, Dynatrace, Big Panda, and Nuvolo. Our ongoing webinar series is designed to inform, enlighten, and start discussions within your own organizations. If you require any additional information after listening to today's webinar, please reach out to us through our website, www.alcortech.com. Today's webinar is also on social media. You can follow, comment, and get regular updates for today's webinar with the hashtag AlcorWebinar. That's hashtag or number sign ALCORWEBINAR. We have reserved time at the end of the webinar for Q&A, so please feel free to type any questions into the questions section. Today's webinar topic is how does security operations, vulnerability, and threat work in ServiceNow? Presented by Nick Nash and John Vincent Reyes. Nick Nash is a senior consultant with Alcor and has a strong background in project management, business analysis, solution consulting, and technical consulting. Nick has multiple ServiceNow certifications and has extensive ServiceNow experience in PPM, service mapping, CMDB, and security operations, or SecOps, including threat intelligence, vulnerability response, and security incident response. Nick possesses ServiceNow, ITIL, PMP, and Scrum Master certifications. John Vincent is one of Alcor's top technical consultants, is ServiceNow certified, and is a recent technology and information management graduate of the University of California, Santa Cruz. Since joining Alcor, he has been involved in over 20 ServiceNow implementations, specializing in ITSM and its best practices. I will now turn the webinar over to Nick and John Vincent.
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you're at. The webinar agenda right now is to kind of go over SecOps and how it helps out your organization, understanding the roadmap to get the maximum value out of SecOps, and then JV is going to do a demo of ServiceNow SecOps. So the key CISO question that is on a lot of minds are we secure, and are things getting better or worse? And so hopefully what we're going to have after this webinar is the ability for you to, if not answer that question, have a roadmap or a rough idea for how to answer that question. So cybersecurity, the scope is really digital security, then Internet of Things, then information security. And once you're already into that digital security piece, you're actually being reactive, you're on the defense. And what you really want to stay is offensive and proactive. And hopefully we're going to be able to show you how to go about doing that. Another way to look at cybersecurity is the scope. So you want to be able to predict, prevent, detect, and respond. So the CISO Mind Map really gives you a good idea for what is on information security officers' minds. So in the left-hand quadrant, you have the business enablement, which is cloud computing process. You have project delivery lifecycle, budget, security architecture. You have all of these different areas that you want to pay attention to. And that ServiceNow actually can help out with pretty much all of these. But today we're going to be talking about the upper right quadrant, which is SecOps, which is threat prevention, threat detection, and security incident management. we'll kind of be touching a little bit on governance, maybe a little bit on risk management, and probably, a smattering across the board of what you're seeing here, but mainly in this upper right quadrant. So what is the need? On average, it takes a company to 206 days to spot a breach and 69 days to contain it. And that's just not feasible in the current marketplace, and it's not feasible going forward. So we need to find those things faster, detect them faster, and we need to respond to them a lot faster. So this is a market simplified, and these are kind of the lead players in these particular verticals. So enforcement is Palo Alto Networks. Detection, FireEye does a great job. Splunk is very good at visibility and metrics and plotting all those things out so you have a really good sense for what's going on. And then, of course, there's all of these other players. So security incident and event management, there's Splunk, there's McAfee, there's a lot of other folks in those in that group. For network protection, as mentioned, F5 and Tenable do a great job. Palo Alto is again that lead player. For endpoint solutions, Tanium I think is extremely good. FireEye does a great job as well. And then access and identity, so identity management, Dropbox. Okta is the one that you hear most when you're referring to ServiceNow. But these other players, so MobileIron does a great job as well. So what is going on is each one of these companies has a stake in that particular area, and they're trying to expand into those other areas, but they're not necessarily doing a great job with it. Palo Alto has multiple different pieces of tools that extend into endpoint solutions and then event management and other pieces, but you really need a way to tie all of these together, and so that's what we're hopefully going to show you with ServiceNow, is that it's a great integration tool and gives you the ability to respond to these things a lot faster. So as this slide shows, if you're using that many different tools, you're getting all of these different spreadsheets, and it's just very difficult to manage this, and you end up with this wave, this overwhelming amount of noise that's coming at your security team, and what do you do with it? How do you parse through that? And it's very difficult because you end up getting overwhelmed with all of this minutia that you actually shouldn't be paying attention to, and it allows the opportunity for other pieces that are more severe to slip by. So on the detection side, again we have that security incident and event management. We have firewalls, we have security endpoint, identity and access. All of this stuff is coming at you, and you're trying to make sense if it's a real big issue or if it's something that you don't really need to worry about. And then how do you respond to that? So you need to consolidate that information, you need to understand the business impact. Auto remediation would be extremely helpful for security teams, and that's orchestration within ServiceNow, which we'll get back to. Understanding the business impact, which is service mapping within ServiceNow, which we'll get to in a few more slides. But all of those things would help out with that response. And this is just another way of looking at it. There's all of these things coming in, and security teams seem to be pretty thin as far as staffing, and so it's very easy for all of these things to very quickly be overwhelming. So this is an example of a workflow for today's incident response. It's probably a little hyperbolic, which means that it's emailing back and forth between these folks. I'll bet your organizations have a bit better of a flow than this, but the point is that you as the security professional, you have to interact with all of these different groups, and whether that's by emails or calling or Excel sheets or trying to get them access to your different security solutions, it can be very difficult just for one incident, let alone for all of the stuff that's coming in on a daily basis. So why is security failing? It's because, the communication aspect of it and tying it all together. So again, email, Excel, calling, these probably aren't the best ways to deal with these incidents. Also, the majority of the breaches are due to existing vulnerabilities. And so what ServiceNow tries to do is pull in all of those existing vulnerabilities and give you insight into, okay, what vulnerabilities do you have, and how can you remediate those? So the need, again, is this response piece. So you have your enforcement, detection, visibility, and you have a ton of tools to go about doing that. There's also a good number of tools to do response, but the nice thing about ServiceNow is that it allows for those integrations into those tools very easily. So one of the ways that ServiceNow helps out is through orchestration and through workflows. So if you remember back 3 slides where you're calling everybody, you're sending emails, you're sending Excel sheets, this would actually, the workflow would allow all of those things to happen all at once, as long as you just set that up front. If this particular type of thing comes in, it kicks off all of these other pieces. And so SecOps is, again, delivering response. It's streamlining that remediation, the fixing of it, and giving you visualization into what's going on. So to resolve real security threats fast, you want to integrate, you want to automatically prioritize, you want to use threat intelligence, you want to use vulnerability analysis, determine response action. That'll allow you to fix those threats fast, and then you can also run post-incident reports within ServiceNow. So this is security incident response kind of in just one chart. It's a platform for security operations control, event management. It pulls in from NIST best practices and integrates with threat intelligence portal. This is the one slide for vulnerability response, which again integrates with other databases, so the National Vulnerability Database, integrates with other third-party applications that you may already be using, and is a platform for managing those different vulnerabilities. And then lastly, we have threat intelligence, which again gives you that visualization. You're able to pull in multiple feeds, and you get that, again, I keep using the word integration, and it's because it's so important and it's so pivotal for this particular tool within ServiceNow. So anytime we've got these screens that show the tool, I'm going to probably burn through them pretty quickly because JV is going to give you a live demo, and I think you'll get probably a bit more out of that. But the one thing to point out here is that, again, this is a NIST-based process. So we're trying to take best practices and pull them in so that we're running this appropriately. Again, you have support for multiple threat intelligence feeds, as we said on the previous slide. Business impact, you can have a calculator that will calculate out severity based on the impact and priority. Business service mapping, this is one of those key components where if you are using business service maps, you're going to get a lot more out of your SecOps, your CMDB. And what business service mapping does is it takes whichever business service that you think is critical to your operations, and it maps out which pieces are important to that, and it tells you the relationships between all of those. And that way, if you have a security incident on one of those items, now you can pull up that business service map and go, oh, that's, that item is actually connected to our most critical business service now it's sub 1, you need to fix that immediately. And you can also set up SLAs based on these particular items. So this is another way of looking at a workflow and how it can help out. I'll let JB speak to that when he does the live demo. So streamlining remediation, service level management, again, using these workflows, automatically kicking off. So say an event comes into the tool and you have, if this event comes through, this workflow kicks off. All of a sudden you don't need a person in the loop. Everybody that needs to get notified gets notified. And orchestration plays into all of these different applications. So AWS, Amazon Web Services, Tanium, Active Directory, Azure, all of these are key players in the marketplace, and orchestration, which is ServiceNow's setup for how to automatically do these things, can pull in from any and all of those and work well with them. On top of that, you have the ability to have assessments. So how did that incident response go? Did it cause damage before it was detected? Should additional logging be enabled? And you have the ability to change all of these assessments, all of these questions. And you can also host post-incident reviews through the tool and capture any of that information. You can start a conference call with the tool, and you can say who the participants are by requested by, closed by, previous agent, or affected user. You also have access to the security knowledge base, which gives you event systems documentation, your SOPs documentation, so your standard operating procedures, and key contact lists. You can have security operations within your service catalog as well. So if you want your users to be more easily able to report phishing or report on policy violations or difficulties in request access, you can have all of that as part of this service catalog, and it will open this up and you can have a workflow behind it. All right, so this is our last piece, which is visualizing security posture. And this chart, I think, says a lot. So in the upper left here, we have our most vulnerable configuration items by class. So we can see that our servers are the most vulnerable pieces of our infrastructure. A Windows server, Unix server, AIX server. And then most vulnerable CIs, we can see that the MacBook Pro 15 is pretty small, but the Asus G series has 54 known vulnerabilities. And you can see how many of those items comprise your vulnerable CIs. SLAs by stage, you can see which ones are breached. You can drill down into that information as well through these charts. You can also see vulnerabilities by business service. So if you have your business services populated, you can see those vulnerabilities and where the most vulnerable business services are so that you can plan ahead and create mitigating steps for that. You can also see your severe vulnerabilities by business service. All right, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to JV, who's going to do a live demo.
Hi, thank you, Nick. So, Nick, just to confirm, you can hear me okay?
Yep, I can hear you well.
Okay, great. And you can see my screen?
I can only see the technical demonstration screen.
I can,
Can you pass the presenter to
I
JV?
did. I can see the screen.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So good morning, everybody, or good afternoon. Once again, my name is John Vincent, and I'm a technical lead at Alcor, and today I'll be demoing to you what you get with security operations. So if you're to obtain the security operations suite, you have the following three main components for it. You get security incident, vulnerability, and threat intelligence. Okay, so before we dive into those three, I do want to show you that if you do get the security operations suite, they actually offer you some integrations, I don't want to say out of the box, but readily available. So under the security operations module, I click on the integration configurations, and you have these plugins readily accessible. They have Qualys, VirusTotal, QRadar, Splunk, Palo Alto, Tanium. Okay. Some of them you can install the plugin. Others you just have to install the you have to download it from the App Store. Okay. So I'm not going to go into each one. Just wanted to show you what some readily accessible integrations are offered. Okay, so first one we have is security incident response. And if you're familiar with facilities and incident, I believe that security incident response is very similar to those other two, with a little bit of request in there as well. So there's three ways that you can create a security incident. You can either create it manually here, from a security request, and we'll go into the request later on, or automatically from an alert. So what I mean by that is, for example, if you have Splunk integrated, any alert that Splunk gives you can automatically create a security incident for you. Okay. For each security incident, you have a process flow, again, similar to incident and facilities. And the workflow, I think that Nick mentioned this earlier, the workflow is based off of the categories. If I select a different security incident, so for this one, for example, the workflow for this category is going to be different for the workflow for, say, denial of service or malicious code activity. Of course, it can be configured as well. We can have the workflows based on other pieces of information. And within the workflow, you can create security tasks. You know, the usual, I think most people here will be familiar with workflows, but you can have tasks, even approvers if you wanted to. And the cool thing that ServiceNow allows you to do with workflows is it allows for automation. So if we take the malicious code activity, for example, if a security incident comes in with malicious code activity as a category, we can actually automate the workflow to automatically disable the user's profile in AD, automatically. And then once the user's profile is disabled, maybe it'll create some additional tasks that'll tell the security agent to go check on the user, restore or investigate the issue. Okay. So other pieces of information on the security incident, you have where the source is coming from, the severity with a priority, knowledge, this is the contextual search results again, and you have some extra tabs here that might be new to some people. You have, under incident details, you have secured notes. Under the observables, you can put in the IP addresses of, if this was, say, for example, malicious URL, for example, you can put in the IP, you can put in the hash, and other indicators of compromise. That's what IOC stands for. And these following tabs, once we get into threat intelligence and vulnerability, you can add in those pieces of information within a security incident. Okay. So moving down, we have the runbook, and the runbook is it's just another term for a knowledge article. So security does have its own knowledge base. And what the runbook is for security teams to have sort of a guideline or policy to how to handle a specific security incident. So if I choose, if I choose this one, for example, this security incident comes in, I look at the runbook, and I want to see what's the best way to proceed forward. And it shows me the applicable runbooks. And again, these are just knowledge articles, but you can configure rules. So for example, for this specific incident, it showed me these runbooks because this is an incident that's impacting business services and has a configuration item. We can just click on that and it'll just show up this knowledge article for outlining how to handle that specific incident. Okay. And other things to show here, we have task SLAs and tasks, as well as, Nick also mentioned this earlier with the BSM. For example, if we had, for this specific, for a specific incident, we can go into the BSM to see what business services it's affecting. So for this security incident, for example, we'll click on the Show Dependency Views, and we can see that that particular configuration item, PS Apache 2, is connected to all of these business services and servers. Okay. So we know that there's an incident on this specific CI, what business service will it affect? And you can see that in the dependency view. You can see these little icons say there's a security incident. Okay. Other things that are shown here will post-incident review. So if I go into a closed security incident, a post-incident review is once the security incident has gone through all of its states or processes, and it captures every piece of information that happened with the security incident, including any comments made to your teammates, any associated tasks are captured in this post-incident review. So you have a summary, what teams were involved, timeline with the resolution, and then the problem attached to it. Okay. So as I mentioned earlier, another way to create an incident is from a request, and so the way that occurs is there is a security incident catalog that, based upon your organization, whoever can access it is, you can configure and who can access it. If you only want IT or security to access it, that's easily configurable. But if we were to fill one of these out, for example, a policy violation, and submit it, this doesn't create a security incident. This creates a request. And from that request, we create security incidents. I know it might be a little weird, but a request is sort of a person requesting the security team to go investigate something. So it might not necessarily be a security incident right away. I might just be an IT agent and they say, hey, I think there might be something wrong here. Can you go look at it? So I would put in a request for the security agent to go investigate something. And as a security agent, if I do deem it that it is a security incident or a breach, I can then convert this request into a security incident. Okay. So that was security incident response. Moving forward, we'll go on to vulnerability management. So what vulnerability management essentially is that you're comparing the library of known vulnerabilities to your CIs. Okay? And that vulnerability data comes in from NVD and CWE. NVD is the National Vulnerability Database, and CWE is stands for Common Weakness Enumerations, which is essentially just a list of software vulnerabilities. So you pull in information from NVD and CWE. You can see here that we have integrations. So we are integrating with CWE and NVD. We are pulling in data from these databases. There's actually an NVD auto update, so those updates can be run on a schedule, or you can run it manually to update your database. And as you can see, if we go under the libraries, you can see all of the NVD entries, about 2,000 of them, and for the CW entries, about 1,000 of them. Once you have those libraries and your data set up in your, or feeding into your instance, you then create a scanner. And these scanners are similar to Discovery. So you would create a scanner, and then you would scan your configuration items. Okay, so just for demo purposes, I set up a scanner, and I told it to scan these 3 configuration items. And then once the scanner is complete, if there are any vulnerable matches, then it creates a vulnerable item. So if we go into the first one here, we see that this specific CI matched this vulnerability. So the error 13 matched this vulnerability, and you can go into the actual vulnerability itself and see what it is, or go into the CI item itself. But once you have a vulnerable item, what then you can do is you can either choose to ignore it, close or ignore it, or you can create changes, problems, or security incidents. So a scenario or a real life example might be after we finish the scanner, we found a vulnerable item on a person's laptop. We look at that vulnerable item, we see, oh, this is a vulnerability, it might cause problems down the line. Let me create a security incident to go fix that problem in that person's computer. Other tabs we have here, we just have pieces of information, IP address, DSN name, and notes. Okay. Moving on to threat intelligence. So threat intelligence is the sharing of cybersecurity information from within and from outside of your organization. So if you're familiar with security ops, you might have heard the terms of STIX and TAXII. STIX is the structured language for describing cyber threat information, to store, analyze, and to share it. And TAXII is just a mechanism for the exchange of that information. Okay. So sort of similar to vulnerability. The first thing we have to do is define threat sources. So we have to set up where the data is coming from. So from threat sources, we can bring in data, we can bring in STIX data through threat sources, or we create a TAXII profile, which will bring in data from a TAXII source or TAXII database. Okay, but I guess just the important thing to know is that you need to bring in those pieces of data from outside of the organization, or not, or you can just have, data within your organization. Okay, but once we have the sources of information or the threat sources, then those threat sources populate this IOC repository. So attack modes and methods, indicators, and observables. We're not scanning anything. All we're doing is we're setting up the threat sources that are bringing in data that will populate this IOC repository, which is attack modes and methods, indicators, and observables. Okay. All three are related, meaning that in attack modes you can have indicators, in observables you can have attack modes, and in indicators will have both attack modes and observables. But attack modes and methods, you can see we have the title, we have what type it is, it could be a Trojan, it could be spam. But going into each one, you can see that the source of this came from gas data abuse, which is the taxi profile. Okay. And then within this attack mode and method, these are the indicators of compromise associated with it. Okay. Moving on to indicators, these indicators of compromise are the artifacts observed on a network that likely indicates an intrusion. Doesn't necessarily mean there's an intrusion, but would most likely have an intrusion. And identifying this is very important for the detection of future attacks using an intrusion detection software or your antivirus. Okay. So for this specific indicator, we have related observables, related attack modes and methods, and yes, tasks associated with it. And I'll go into tasks a little bit more in a bit. And then lastly, we have observables. And then your observables are just stateful properties or any measurable event such as a URL, a hash, that sets of these are useful in identifying indicators. So we have the observable type, we have the type of URL, and then on the bottom we have related indicators. And as I mentioned before, we have associated tasks. So for all three of these, what you can do is you can associate a change, problem, or security incident response to any of the items within these. You can attach an SIR to an attack mode. You can attach a change to an indicator. You can attach a problem to an observable. Okay. And then once you have a repository of threat intelligence, and this is important because even within your organization, if you're constantly fending off attacks, you want to consolidate that information into your threat intelligence so that if it happens again in the future, you'll know how best to defend against it. And you can even bring it, use it alongside your antivirus. Okay, I think that was it for me. I'm just looking over to see if I missed anything. I guess one thing I did forget to mention is that once you have that threat information and vulnerability, you can use that information in your security incident response as well. Okay. So I think that's it for the technical demo. I bring it back to Jeff and Nick.
Great, thanks very much, John Vincent. Good stuff.
All right, so there's just a couple more slides and then we're going to open it up to questions. So this is our service automation architecture slide, and I realize it's a bit busy, but the point of this is that we're working with a lot of different groups and integrating a lot of different tools to ServiceNow. And the nice part is ServiceNow plays well with all of these, and that ties into our service strategy, our service operation, our service automation, and data integration as well. This is our automation architecture, and this is a list of our services. So strategy and design, we offer technical planning and roadmaps. We do architecture design for the cloud. We do business process engineering. For implementation and integration, clearly we do every application within ServiceNow. We do gap analysis for your current state and future states. And then operations and remediation, we do continual service improvement and ongoing administrative support. So if any of that sounds good to you, please feel free to email us through the website or contact us individually. And with that, do we have any questions?
Yeah, perfect. Thanks very much, Nick and John Vincent. There are some questions. I'll get to them in a minute. As a reminder, please use the question section of the webinar screen here to ask questions on today's topic. So I do have a handful of them here. I think we've got just under 20 minutes. We should be able to get to them. So Nick and John Vincent, I will let you guys decide who best to answer these questions as we go through them here. So the first one is service mapping or discovery mandatory to use security operations?
All right, so I'll tackle that one. So the short answer is no. The longer answer is they're very helpful. So using any discovery tool, you're going to get a lot more information about the configuration items that are on your network. And using service mapping, you're going to get insight into what those business critical activities are and what CIs are part of those. And that way, if you have a security incident that happens to one of those CIs, you understand what the impact is downstream, and you can also say who the points of contact are for that particular incident. So you want to let them know that, hey, there's this thing going on, and you also need to figure out a way to remediate that.
Okay.
And to add on to that, for vulnerability, asset management, I believe it's mandatory, because what will you scan against? So maybe for security incident or threat intelligence, asset management might be non-mandatory, but I believe for vulnerability, it's a must. If you want it to, no, I take that back. Asset management is mandatory for vulnerability.
Okay. All right, cool. Thanks, guys. Is security operations a different license than standard ServiceNow? Do either of you know?
Yeah, so again, the short answer here is yes. And the longer answer that I would give is, if you want to know about security operations licensing, you should contact your local ServiceNow rep and get more information, because typically the more entrenched you are with the software, the more they can give you discounts on those things. So I'd be hesitant to give any sort of numbers, because your ServiceNow sales rep would actually be able to give you more information and better numbers than I could give.
Okay. Okay, awesome. Is asset management necessary to use security operations? So JV, John Vincent, you already answered that one. So good. How does the development of SecOps differ for a small or a large company? Immature versus mature security group.
I think Nick can probably talk to that more, but for me, I really don't see, or the difference that I see is just your security policies and procedures. So a more mature or a larger enterprise might have a security policy already in place that we'll have to configure based on. So, they might have multiple workflows, they might have approvers, et cetera. So if that's the case, then, development would be a little different in that we would set up the workflows based on the enterprise's policy. But if you're a smaller company, a smaller enterprise, you don't really have a set policy or procedure, then we can definitely, I don't want to say stick to out of the box, but align it to best practices more out of the box in terms of if these enterprises have policies. However, if this question is more towards, is that needed, I think that any company or any enterprise needs security operations because everybody's a target.
Yeah, so, and the way that I would answer that is kind of, holistically. When you think about ServiceNow and how bigger and smaller companies implement it, typically bigger companies implement more of it, and smaller companies implement less of it, and it's, extremely lean. So I would say that smaller companies would prioritize a lot more and say, what are the absolute critical things that we need to do here, whereas larger companies might be able to actually take more advantage of the orchestration piece of this, the business service mapping piece, and maybe even tie in multiple different discovery tools to make sure they're capturing everything on their network. Whereas a smaller company, you might not need business service mapping because you have such a good understanding of that already because you just don't have that many assets. Likewise, you might be pulling in a different discovery tool that you're already using, such as Tenable, and using that as your discovery as opposed to using ServiceNow's discovery. So I would say the difference is how much of ServiceNow's platform that you are implementing.
Okay. How is the security incident module related to the regular incident module?
So I believe you can create an incident based off of a security incident response. They're really meant for two different purposes. Incident is like an IT incident, laptop's broken, printer's broken. Security incident is more, we have a breach, we really need to fix this. But in terms of creating one after the other, I believe you can create an incident off of a security incident, but I don't think you can create a security incident off of an incident.
Okay.
I believe that you can. I believe it can go actually both ways. Okay, but that would be something that I would need to research to be 100% sure on.
Okay, we will we'll get back to the person that submitted that question on that one. So, okay, good. From where did, this sounds like it's for John Vincent. From where did you activate security, vulnerability, and threat modules for dev instances?
So the demo that I just showed you today was on my personal instance. So if you have personal instances, you can do this yourself. You would just go into the plugin list, and I'll get the, so if you haven't set up any plugins before, just type in plugin in the application navigator, and I think there's like 4 different plugins you need to activate. I'm finding that right now. Finding that out right now.
So yeah, I will say that.
So the first.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, JV.
So yeah, so the first plugin that you need to activate is Security Incident Response. I believe that might have all of it, but I forgot which ones were needed. But I believe there were 4. But if you were to activate Security Incident Response, it tells you what the other plugins that are needed that you need to activate are to have all of it. So since I've already activated, I can't tell you like which 4 or which 3 others I need. But once you do activate security incident response, it'll tell you you also need security, contextual security, or high security, no, not high, or security incident analytics to get the other 2. So I believe that those 3 might be it. I believe it's security incident response, security incident analytics, and contextual security. No, it's just those 2. So security incident response and security incident analytics.
Analytics.
That's the 2 that you need. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, perfect. Person said, got it, thanks. So excellent, good stuff. All right, what are we doing? How are we doing for time? Oh, 10 minutes, so we're still good. Is SecOps available in Express? Do either of you know?
So no, it is not. It is not available in Express.
Okay. Can you convert vulnerable items into security incidents?
You don't necessarily convert it. You create a security incident based off of that vulnerable item.
All right. And we are at the last question. So just a reminder, if anyone has any questions, please type them into the question window. So the last question here that I have at this point is, can you set the workflow on security incident response based on other fields?
Yes, you can. And that's just like a configuration. Just like with any workflow editor, you can set the conditions on anything. Out of the box, security incident response is just based off of the workflow. That's why I just mentioned it. But yes, you can change that to be based on any other piece of information available.
Okay. Someone has asked if the recording of this webinar will be available. It will be available on our website, www.alcortech.com. So I was able to answer a question. There's no link to activate all these plugins you mentioned. So JV, I'll put you in touch with Nitish, and we'll help them with this question.
Sure thing.
All right, perfect. All right, I think that is it. So again, the recording of today's webinar will be available on our website, www.alcortech.com, and on our social media networking sites. Thanks everybody for joining, and we will see you at the next webinar.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.